This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Express. This is Gary Allen joining you on a wonderful Tuesday evening. I hope everybody's having a great week. And, of course, we're all looking forward to the Super Bowl, which will be coming up in just a few days from now. We're very honored tonight to have a couple of guests with us. My first guest I'll tell you about in just a minute. My second guest will be Randy West. He's a talk show host, but he's a game show host, announcer, voiceover actor, and one of his dear friends in the whole world was the late Johnny Olson. We're going to talk about his life in show business, as well as some of the things that he's done as an announcer as well as a game show host. Like I said, he has an illustrious career. For those of you that are looking to follow me, go ahead on Facebook and go to Gary Allen, A-L-A-N, as my first guest has, and go to youtube.com. Go to Gary Allen The Express, and that's A-L-A-M, The Express. You're going to get the country guy, the country singer. And then if you scroll down or look down a little bit, it'll be in blue, Gary Allen, The Interview. So you should be able to hear any of my past shows, and all of the current shows for this year have been put up there and have been posted. Like I said, we have two guests this evening, and my very first guest is Mr. Jason Greer, He's the president of Greer Consulting. He's also a race relations expert as well as a diversity consultant, and we're really looking forward to having him on with us. We're going to talk about what happened last night in Iowa and where things are going. Also, want to say a special hello to Randy out there. I keep forgetting EW. Thank you to say hello to Randy. He listens to us every week, come rain or shine, so I look forward to that. And I know, Jason, you're out there, so good evening, and thank you so much for joining us here on The Express.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gary. It's always a pleasure.
Well, listen, before we go too far, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened in Iowa last night, and things are progressing forward, heading into New Hampshire, as well as which of these candidates speaks to the urban community of America. Which one of these candidates, in your opinion, speaks to that? And we're going to get all through that. Last night, we saw Ted Cruz win in a state where Donald Trump said he was going to win. And if I'm not too incorrect, he had to kind of eat his words a little bit last night, although this morning he was busy on Twitter, basically trouncing Cruz as well as Marco Rubio, who came out of nowhere to get 23% of the vote. Trump got 24% and Cruz got 28%. But now, and then we'll get to Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, because that's interesting all within itself. But now things change. There are not as many evangelicals in the New Hampshire area. They're a little more liberal. On the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders has a major lead over Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton just barely won last night by the flip of a coin. Ted Cruz is on an uphill battle here in New Hampshire, Jason, and I think things are going to change. But before we get to all of that, what has Donald Trump done to the electorate? He's turned it upside down and inside out. And are we ever going to get back to normalcy again?
Define normalcy. I'll tell you, Donald Trump is brilliant. And I'll tell you why Donald Trump is brilliant. Donald Trump, somewhere 10, 15 years ago, whenever that whole Celebrity Apprentice thing started, Donald Trump recognized that America was growing. We have this deep fascination with television, with iPads, with screens. We're constantly plugged in with videos. And he recognized that if I can become a brand in itself through social media, through television programs, whatever the case might be, I can even, coin a phrase like "you're fired." People have been hearing "you're fired" ever since we had the industrial age, since the beginning of the industrial age. It became the Donald who personified that. Donald Trump, whether we'd like to admit it or not, has been in the public consciousness for the past 15 years. He's been in our face. So by the time he decided to actually go ahead and run for president, I laughed. A lot of people laughed. But people like someone that they can recognize. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton. A lot of people are not quite sure what Hillary Clinton stands for. We just know that we've had a Clinton in office in some form or fashion since, 92?
Yes.
So Donald Trump has changed the way we look at politicians, but I think if people are being really reflective, we need to begin to identify how Donald Trump has caused us to look at ourselves differently, because we're no longer electing leaders. We're electing celebrities.
Yes.
I mean, the guy, I never thought I would hear Donald Trump say, well, I don't mind coming in number 2 because I really didn't spend as much money here. And, a bunch of excuses, whereas you have this guy who's built a brand around not only being first, but being first and being the best first place money he's ever seen before.
Right.
So it's a different world that we live in, Gary.
I think last night when he had to kind of grovel a little bit and say what you just said, that, I don't mind coming in second. Oh, he minds. I think he minds a great deal.
Oh, it hurt.
And I think if he doesn't do any better in New Hampshire, then he turns into what my friend Al Hunt said last night on Charlie Rose. He becomes a paper tiger, and he will slowly erode and go away, which is what the pundits and the people that are certainly more knowledgeable than I am in the political arena have been saying for a long time, that he will eventually meet his Waterloo and he will fade away. He will disappear from the political landscape. But my premise is what he has done and what he has brought to the political landscape. The American people like to hear what he has to say. He's against the establishment. He's not part of the organized political base that's on both parties. But a lot that he says is illegal that he wants to do. A lot of it he can't do. All of them on the Republican side say that they want to repeal Obamacare. Well, if you think about it, that's never going to happen. Now, they might be able to choke some of it off. I just saw before we went on the air today that the House was unable to get enough votes, and the president vetoed. They're trying to repeal Obamacare along with Planned Parenthood, and there's not enough votes to override his veto. So even if you get a Republican president in there, you might be able to choke off some of what we call Obamacare, but you're never going to be able to do away with it because it's a law, and it's time the American people grow up and realize that that's the way it really is. But it keeps pundits talking on the radio. But has Donald Trump set forth a new political wave of how to deal, as you said, with the media, how to deal with things? And here's another thing, too. The guy wants to be president, Jason, and you are a president of a company. Your skin has to be a little bit thicker than most people, correct?
Absolutely. Well, the guy wants to be president. Okay, go ahead.
He wants to be president, but for some strange reason, a question by a person on a certain network has stifled him to the point where he walked away from a debate last week that probably cost him last night.
Very true. If his own internal polling numbers didn't suggest to him that he was still up, even if he didn't take Iowa, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that Donald Trump he's wily, but he's more informed than he's ever going to let any of us know. What Donald Trump understands is this. Yeah, what Donald Trump understands is this. Donald Trump knows that there's a contingent within the conservative party that feels like their voices have not been heard, and there are things that they want to say about living in Obama's America, things that they want to say about their current situation. And when I'm speaking specifically to, it's not even fair to call them conservatives. I'm speaking specifically to racist white men. Mm-hmm. Because when I listen to the things that Donald Trump is saying, brother, I don't get why he's not in jail. I don't get why television networks are not censoring him left and right. Yet he says these things. He's become this firebrand of things I don't even think he quite believes himself. Yeah. But nevertheless, you have people who are turning out en masse, with the exception of Iowa. They're turning out en masse because they want to hear what he has to say next. Right. Now, the challenge that Donald Trump is going to have is he thinks he's an Obama in terms of his ability to run a political campaign, but he's not. Yeah. When you consider that in 2008, Obama was very good about courting the first-time voters. He also understood that just because I'm courting you with my rhetoric, I also need to push you to come out to the polls with our ground game. Donald Trump and his entire organization is built around the Donald. So he's good about the rhetoric. He's good about getting the first-time voter inflamed, ready to go, ready to commit action, but they just have not put the boots on the ground to make sure that those people come out because they have not been able to quite identify who exactly these people are.
Right. I think he thought his bravado was going to be enough and he didn't have to worry about a ground game, but I think he learned that lesson last night. The shock to me was Marco. Go ahead.
Yeah, but why wouldn't he? I mean, you consider, you talked about the fact that he's a president, and I look at it as president of my organization. What Donald Trump needs to be careful of is, it's a big deal when you go into Chicago or you go into New York and you see Trump Plaza, you go to the golf course, you see Trump everywhere. Well, he's a brand in himself. But he needs to understand that just because he's the brand, he needs to build an infrastructure around him of people who are going to push that brand, right?
Right.
And doing this, running a business, and I think it's the same thing that Bruce Rayner, or however you say his name is, the governor in Illinois, the billionaire, it's the problem that he's facing also. You can sit back in your ivory tower and you can conceptualize all day long about what it's like to run a country, what it's like to run a state, because this is how I run my business. But running a country, running a state is far different than looking at profit loss statement on your company.
Right.
And we need to be careful as voters that we make a conscientious choice to elect leaders and not just the flavor of the month. And the politicians on the other side are going to need to be incredibly careful that they're in this for the right reasons.
Yeah. The surprise that came out of last night for me was Marco Rubio, who I couldn't vote for. I couldn't vote for Marco Rubio if you laid $1 million down at my feet. I just don't like the man. There's something, a friend of mine in Miami tonight, where Marco Rubio is from and who is also a Cuban American, said there's something that doesn't add up about this guy. And even when he was a state senator, something didn't add up about this guy. I just don't like Marco Rubio. And here's the interesting thing, though. If Ted Cruz turns out to be, which he could, as soon as they get into that, in a couple of weeks from now, when they do the SEC, what they call the SEC states, the southern states where there's a lot of evangelicals, which he panders to. And I don't believe he's any more of a Christian than the man on the moon. His father's a minister, but his father's a racist and a bigot. And I don't mind saying that. But Ted Cruz, if he turns out to be the guy up against, say, Hillary Clinton, Clinton will clean his clock regardless of the FBI probe, regardless of anything else going on, Jason, because, a lot of Americans don't like this man. People in his own party, 95% of them don't like him. And a lot of the things that he says are just as bunch of bull as what Trump is saying. And I think he knows it. I just think he wants to be the president of the United States and to thumb his nose at everybody else because he doesn't care about the Republican Party, Jason. He doesn't care about anything but Ted Cruz.
Well, he's a prodigy. I mean, consider this, that Donald Trump runs for president. His run for president has always been, because this isn't the first time doing it, has always been about keeping his name out there. Because if I keep my name out there, it keeps my brand out there. If it keeps my brand out there, I sell more. Right? I mean, I heard him the other day, this morning talking about the fact that he lost Iowa, and he said people don't appreciate the fact that I am self-funded. And then someone challenged him on that and said, "You're not self-funded because there's over $65 million that you received in terms of contributions." And he said, "You're actually talking about merchandise sales."
Right.
What person running for president is looking at the merchandise sales numbers, right? But again, this is Donald Trump. Now, you compare a Donald Trump who's doing this more on a whim, and I don't think he believes he was going to get this far, but he has.
Right.
Versus a Ted Cruz, who everything that I read about the guy, it seems like he came out of his mother's womb talking about, "I want to be president of the United States."
Yes.
He's been very calculating. He's gone out of his way when he was in college. He went out of his way to learn the art of debate. He, people internal to him, because I know two people who work for him, have said that he has the most calculating mind that you've ever seen before, and that's why they don't trust him. And these are people who work for him.
Right. I mean, you
never know. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a very intelligent man. There's no doubt about it. But there's something kind of sneaky about him. He looks like a young version of what was the show? Not the one with the monsters on there, and Herman Munster's uncle was a vampire on their hip.
Oh yeah, the monsters.
Yeah, he reminds me of the uncle on there. You know, he looks like a villain, and he also looks like Joe McCarthy from way back when. For those of you out there not familiar with Joe McCarthy, he was the man that brought the charges against actors and people in the political arena that they were communists. The Americans Against Something Committee. I can't remember. My name is. It's escaping me right now, the action against the Americans. But anyway, he looks like him, and he's sinister, and nobody really likes the man. So if he turns out to be the guy, which I don't think he will, although you never know. If he keeps sailing through and he gets down to all the southern states, he could just as easily be the person with all enough delegates to be the winner and go into the general election against Hillary Clinton, which they're all counting on that this FBI investigation is going to disqualify her, and it's going to end up against Bernie Sanders, which, you know, I have no idea where that's going to turn out. Nobody really does. But let's talk a little bit here. Jason, do you see any of these candidates out there that have any idea, any inkling of how they can help, like what's going on the south side of Chicago right now, what's going on inside the inner cities? The Black Lives Matter movement seems to have died down quite a bit, but do you see any of these candidates that have a clue on what they might do to help the young African-American youth of America to prosper and to keep moving forward, other than what on the Democratic side is 2 years of junior college for free, which is nothing to scoff at. That's quite a bit of savings for a family. But are any of them appealing to you and people in the African-American community?
Well, I think Bernie Sanders probably speaks out of all the Democratic candidates. Bernie Sanders is really the only candidate that's been willing to come forth and state his opinion on race. And what's interesting about Bernie Sanders is he was the one candidate that was really targeted by Black Lives Matter. And he was taken to task because whenever he would talk about race, the only thing he would talk about was, I marched with Martin Luther King. Well, that's great for my father because he came up during that time period. For me, it's, you know, at age 41, yeah, that's cool, Bernie. But for my son who's 22, that doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Because you're talking about sort of 2 or 3 generations removed. But I think that especially when you consider the issue about the police killings, Bernie Sanders is really the only politician, like other politicians like Hillary Clinton gave some voice to it. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders is really the only one that gave any weight to it, that he would actually go to these police officers, these police departments, and instead of finding these people, he would not only make sure that they got fired, he'd make sure that they got prosecuted. I mean, Bernie Sanders has a pretty good record of speaking on race relations. The challenge with the Bernie Sanders, though, is because I believe he's from New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. There's this automatic opinion of anyone that comes from New Hampshire, considering the relatively small number of African Americans and ethnic minorities in New Hampshire, right, that you're automatically labeled as being quote unquote too white. Right. And the reality is that Bernie Sanders, just in terms of, I believe, his overall understanding of not just race relations, but overall his understanding of inequalities, and the fact that he's clearly given a lot of time to how he can address his inequalities. Mm-hmm. The guy has something to say. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from any of the others, and if it comes down to the general election, of course, they'll be pandering to the African-American community, of which generally tends to go in the Democratic side of the fence when it comes to actually voting on election day. But, you know, it's just incredible to me, the pandering that goes on between the two parties to different sections and factions of our communities, whether it be urban America or whether it be the farmers of America or the construction workers or the steel workers. They pander and they pander, and then they get into office and well, you people don't understand why we can't do this and we can't do that. It's like what's going on in the south side of Chicago, a city that I lived in for a number of years. That is just so far out of control right now. I think Rob Emanuel is going to lose his job or have to resign in order to keep it. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know Bernie probably will not be the candidate on the Democratic side. Who do you see on the Republican side that may very well come out of this in the end and be the candidate for the general election?
Likely Ted Cruz. I think that I initially thought that Donald Trump had a legitimate shot. He still has a legitimate shot at getting it. But I think that Ted Cruz, and especially when you look at what he did in Iowa, he has run such a disciplined campaign, right? I mean, it's from the amount of money he's allocated to, his use of metrics, to being able to generate a very good volunteer group. For someone who hates Obama as much as he does, he did a heck of a job at copying Obama's campaign playbook, note for note, step for step.
Oh yeah. When something works, it's like the NFL. When a certain offense is working, everybody eventually ends up copying it, and we live in that kind of a society. It will be interesting if it is Ted Cruz up against, I presume at this point, Hillary Clinton, because as I said earlier, 90% of Americans don't like what Ted Cruz stands for. They don't like the closed type of tent that he has. He's not really all inclusive. If you're not an evangelical, forget it. It's like something I saw on Facebook the other day where this woman, and I don't know what state she lives in, but she's a politician, a state politician. She says that there ought to be a law in her state to make everybody either be a Christian or a Jew, and yet the Republicans are the biggest, and this is a Republican woman. She calls herself a Christian conservative, which is kind of odd because or a constitutional conservative, excuse me. Everybody that I've ever talked to that's a constitutional conservative, you ask them about the Constitution, they don't have a clue what you're talking about except the Second Amendment maybe or the First Amendment. But this woman had a thing out there, Jason. We're talking to Jason Greer from Greer Consulting out of St. Louis, Missouri, one of my best friends in the whole world. She wants that in her state, it's a law. You either be Christian or you be Jewish. You be of the Hebrew faith. Now, you talk about imposing one's will on someone when they don't want it. They're fighting against maybe this country going into Sharia law at some point in a few hundred years or so, and they're pushing that on people. It's amazing what the conservatives out there want to do, what they're against, but what they want to do, in their eyes, they're not against it. They're what they say the Muslims want to do to the world, they want to do, but it's different because they're Christian and they're Muslim. I mean, that's so hypocritical.
Well, it's hypocritical and it's not fair. I mean, I remember when, people were accusing President Obama of being a Muslim, and I remember thinking as I was listening to people say that, you say that as though it's an insult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's a Muslim, okay, can he govern? Right? I mean, we just live. When you asked me the question about who out of the Democratic side seems to resonate with African Americans or with ethnic minorities, I'll say that Bernie Sanders had to work harder to establish his street cred, whereas I think Hillary Clinton, based on the fact that she's a Clinton, realizes that she can coast on the fact that she's a Clinton, and she doesn't have to pander as hard or speak to issues that are impacting minority groups, because she knows that they're going to come with them anyway.
Right.
And that's a dangerous line of thinking, because President Obama, for as much as people want to say, and I still don't get this, as much as people want to say that President Obama has his actions have intensified racism in this country. George Bush actually spoke on race more than President Obama ever has. Bill Clinton spoke on race way more than Barack Obama ever has. So we need to be careful. I think we need to be very mindful in this country that we have a new voting bloc that's coming in, and this is irrespective of race or gender. It's called the young people. Right. And the young people live in an information age, and they want to know what you stand for before I cast my vote for you. Right. Because the millennials are not just going to fall in line anymore. They don't do what we do, Gary.
No,
they don't do what our parents do.
No,
It's a different world.
Yeah, they take it extremely serious, and it's true. You hear often from the right, well, we have a black president in the White House. Why aren't race relations any better? it's not up to him to make race relations any better. It would be nice if things were better. But from the moment the man entered office, the racial strife began with the Senate and the Congress saying, we are not going to let him pass anything. And my last question, because we got to get you out of here in just a couple minutes. Now with Trump running and he's independently wealthy and he doesn't have to depend on PACs or secret money coming in from anywhere other than normal donations, do you think this is going to be the wave of the future? Because Bloomberg has even indicated he might want to get into the race. You think that's what's going to happen in upcoming elections, whether it be local or national, that the rich guys will not have to adhere to a super PAC or a special interest, and they're going to run for office and try to maybe do the right thing?
Absolutely. They're going to try to do the right thing. And I think a lot of times the right thing, unfortunately, is the thing that benefits their business the most.
Right.
I think that, but where they're going to need to be careful, for as rich as Donald Trump is, let's say hypothetically, we have the battle to end all battles. You got Hillary on one side who's polarizing in herself. You got Donald Trump on the other side who's polarizing in himself.
Mm-hmm.
He is self-funded, but there's always somebody richer than you.
Yeah.
And if you don't cater to the politics within the political game, and you don't get their blessing, you best believe that they are going to do whatever they possibly can to bring you down. Yeah. Because you got the Koch brothers, who no one's really talking about right now, who are sitting on the sidelines trying to see who's going to win this thing, and they're sitting on a $900 million war chest.
Yeah.
And that's just the money that we know that they have.
Right. Right.
So it's, do I think it's going to be the wave of the future? Absolutely, because I think that in this country we are predisposed to thinking that if you're rich, you're smart,
mm-hmm.
and we should follow you. That's why I think a politician, a rich businessman or businesswoman
mm-hmm.
can run for office. They can be a billionaire, and they can say to America, hey, or they can say to the respective state or to America, I'll only take $1 in salary. And everyone's like, oh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Right.
Well, he's really not just taking $1 in salary. He's still getting paid by his corporate interests.
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's like Dick Cheney trying to convince everybody that while he was vice president, he wasn't getting any money from Halliburton. Well, they were probably putting it in a trust or an offshore bank account for him that he probably draws from to this day. Jason, I know you have your own podcast now. Tell everybody about it, where they can listen to you. And I know I'm going to be on the show before too long, and we'll let people know about that. But tell everybody about your podcast,
Absolutely.
When it's on, and when people can listen.
Thank you so much, Gary. We have a podcast called People Matter Most, which personifies my core belief in the world that people work for money, but they'll die for respect and they'll die for recognition.
Mm-hmm.
We're bringing business leaders, we're bringing entertainers, we're bringing all kinds of people onto the podcast so that they can really talk about, people, their experiences, how did they get to the point. Like, I can't wait to have you on the show in about the next 3 weeks
mm-hmm.
so we can just hear about your story and, what got you in entertainment? What got you into doing this? And more importantly, what kind of advice can you give to anybody?
Money and girls. Money and girls. Money and girls.
That's the rock star life, Gary. That's the rock star life.
Absolutely. How can they connect with you? When's it on, and where can they tune in?
Awesome question. So we're releasing a podcast every week, and you can definitely find us on iTunes. Just go to iTunes, put in Jason Greer, People Matter Most. Our subscriptions are going through the roof, and man, it's so exciting to be doing this. It's a blast. So I'd love to hear what you all have to say and to be a part of it.
Okay, one last question. Who's going to win Sunday?
I got to go with Carolina, man. Cam Newton's made me into a believer. I love Peyton Manning,
mm-hmm.
but there's something fun about watching a guy go out there and play the game like he's a little kid. What do you think?
I'm hoping.
What do you think?
I'm hoping Peyton will win because this is the last hurrah for him, I think, and he's already been beaten twice in the Super Bowl. I'd like to see him win because Cam will be back at another time. But who knows? I've been through enough of these wars with my own family member playing pro football, so who knows? I mean, who really knows?
Who was it? Who played?
My brother played for the Baltimore Colts, so I went through. I sat through Super Bowl III. Yeah, I sat through Super Bowl III and Super Bowl V. Jason Greer has been our guest for the first half hour. Jason, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day to join us here on the Express, and I'll be talking to you probably sometime tomorrow or the next day. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join us here.
Gary, you're always awesome, man. It's a pleasure. Thank you for everything.
You're more than welcome. And we'll be back in just a couple of minutes with Randy West right after this.
This is The Express with Gary Allen.
Cool.
Now back to your host.
Oh, yeah.
The one.
All right.
The only.
Am I on the air?
Gary Allen.
My guest for the second half of this program is Randy West. Randy is one of the most phenomenal game show hosts, announcer, voiceover actor, producer. You name it, he's done it. He's also worked in radio as a disc jockey and interviewed a number of people. And he's also very, very good friends with the late, great Johnny Olson, who you all remember from The Price is Right. Randy, welcome to the program.
Hey, normally you have to die for someone to talk that nice about you. That's great.
Well, my dear friend, if you want to, go ahead. But your career is in high motion at this particular point. How are you?
Well, I'm wonderful. It's great to talk with you, Gary. Truly is. Love your show, and you're just a fantastic conversationalist. So I've been looking forward to talking with you.
Well, as our dear friend Matt King says from Game Show America, he'll talk your ear off, but eventually you'll be able to sew it back on. I guess I don't know. And now I know how you got into this business, and I know that you used to go to game show tapings in New York when you were a young lad. But who introduced you to the world of radio, and have you ever caught up with them and shot them for putting you in this business?
No, but I know a lot of the listeners I've had over the years have wanted to shoot whoever is responsible. It was Johnny Olson who was the announcer at The Price is Right, as you mentioned, but at the time he was doing the Goodson Todman game shows in New York, specifically What's My Line, and I met him when I was about 15 and told him I wanted to do what he did for a living, which is quite an arrogant thing to say, but
right.
He said, well, the first thing to do is get into radio. And I always loved radio, always felt a connection with the disc jockeys I listened to growing up. So with that extra push from Johnny, that was where I sent out tapes and found the college radio station when I got to college and started to build a little career there, always hoping, but never realizing I would actually get the chance to cross into television.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I started out, this isn't my dream. I wanted to be in another profession to follow in my dad's footsteps, but something kind of stepped in the way. And when I was at the U, I went ahead and worked at the college radio station and, bada bing, bada boom. But I walked away from it for years and moved to L.A. where I was an actor, as you know, with the Groundlings and doing all my other good stuff. But did you ever think in your wildest dreams, and the people that you have worked with, ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea. The man that the people that Randy has worked with are just unbelievable. One of the guests that's been on this program, Wink Martindale. I got to have the Winkster back at some point very soon. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams, Gene Rayburn, who I always wanted to meet, you met, all the game show hosts you can ever think of, Chuck Willery, Bob Eubanks, you name it, they're on
Dick
here.
Clark, and then everybody, just about everybody. I've been very, very lucky. And as you mentioned, Wink, my goodness, we did 4 or 5 different television shows together over the years, and I still consider him a dear friend.
Yeah, I've got to have the Winkster back because I need to call him and thank him. He sent me a care package of some of his old sport coats, and it's a very colorful me when I go out there in public.
Are you serious? He sent you old sport coats?
No. I'm joking.
I love it because, he's that kind of guy. I mean, for a minute there, he's that generous a guy.
No,
I'll give you some names here. Wink, as you mentioned, Dick Clark, as I mentioned, Ryan Seacrest, Bob Barker, Ben Stein, Chuck Woolery, Alan Thicke, Charles Nelson Riley, George Gray, Ann Robinson, Weakest Link, Ray Combs from Family Feud, Mark Summers, whom everybody knows and loves, and it goes on and on from there.
Poor Ray. I mean, what happened to him was terrible. What a great gentleman. But I studied under Charles Nelson Riley. I studied some theater. And,
great.
Yeah, and I really loved it. He loved opera. I loved classical music, but not all of that much. But But what was the very first day for you like in radio? I mean, were you as nervous as all the rest of us?
Oh, my God. First day in radio? Sure. I was up trying to sleep all night, couldn't fall asleep, knew I had to sign the station out at 6 o'clock. So by 4 o'clock, I was already getting dressed, and I didn't live all that far away. And I just nervous beyond belief. Absolutely. And I remember mispronouncing the record. I mean, saying it was Dion DiMucci when it was actually, Ray Conniff singers. I mean, I was just totally blotto in ear and nerves. It was crazy. And plus I had this terrible New York accent. Somewhere I still have some of those early tapes. I sound like I'm taking over for the show here. Hey, how you doing? Which wasn't bad if you were in New York, but the minute I left New York, I had to sound like a real person,
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I read something not long ago, Randy, where 50% or 60% of all broadcasters come from the state of Pennsylvania.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yes, I don't know why. I'm from Pennsylvania, and that's the only reason it caught my eye. I have been unable to figure it out, because if that's the case, then they shouldn't listen to Joe Namath talk at all.
Right. I come from Pennsylvania, but sound like you're from Nebraska. I guess that's the goal.
I think that's it. Randy, over the years, you've done an awful lot of things. Besides being a game show host, an announcer, a warm-up man, with every one of them comes a particular skill set. But to be a good game show host, I know the answer to this, but what type of skill set do you need to be a good game show host? And then I want to know, who is your favorite game show host of all time, to see if it matches what Wink and others have told me. But what are the basic...
You need to listen. You need to listen, because if you're just stacked with a bunch of questions or comments, you miss all the magic, because you have to be able to be flexible enough to go where the contestants lead you. The contestant is the star, and you want to make them look good, and you can't do that unless you're responding to what they're saying and how they're behaving and what they're feeling and what they're acting out for you. And the best game show host, well, hands down, the answer you'll get from everybody, the more experience they have in the business, the more they realize what a talent Bill Cullen was.
Yes.
He could do any kind of a format. See, now, Bob Barker is wonderful with audience participation, finding a nugget in somebody that's just called out of the audience who he's never met before. But if you put Bob Barker doing, let's say, Jeopardy, forget it. And Alex Trebek would be terrible on The Price is Right. So It's specialized, but I tell you, Bill Cullen could do anything. He was just marvelous.
And I loved watching him. Gene Rayburn, I loved a great deal. Chuck Willery, I liked very much with the dating game thing that he was doing for a long time.
Love Connection, sure.
Yeah, Love Connection. But, I got to tell you something, and this is just between me and you and a few people listening in. I think that the current Price is Right host, and I'm not mentioning any names, I don't think I'll be honest with you, I loved him as a comic. He's a good actor, but I don't think he fills the shoes, and they're big shoes to fill, of Bob Barker, but I don't think he really does all that great of a job. I'd rather see somebody with a little more personality on that stage for The Price is Right.
Well, Roger Dopkowitz was a producer of The Price is Right for 36 years. He worked on that show, and we talk about this on a regular basis. He left after 1 year with Drew. And, he's just brokenhearted because he put 36 years of his life into that show, and he's seeing Drew being Drew, which is fine, but it's just goes against the grain of so many of the things a game show host is supposed to do as far as empathy and building drama and excitement. As this next number, higher than 3, he just throws everything away and, there you go. He's just kind of walking through the thing. So
right.
I agree with you totally, and a lot of people do, but as Les Moonves, who hired Drew to do this show, said, of the other people we saw and interviewed and run pilots with, most of them, it's going to cost me millions of dollars to get America to know who the hell they are. But if I say Drew Carey, he'll bring an instant audience with him, and even if you don't know him, you know the name, and you'll tune in. So there was a familiarity there. Plus, he was doing a game show for CBS short-lived called Power of 10, and he actually... the format of that show was far more suited to him, so he looked better there than I think he looks on Price. But you and I are absolutely in agreement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and keep in mind that Moon hired his wife to do a show called The Talk, so we won't go any further with that.
and Big Brother. So
yes, which I'm not a big reality fan of at all. This is a question that I have been asked myself. I even asked Wink, and I know everybody in the radio or television career has felt this at some time or another. at some point in your career, whether it was in radio or television, did you ever feel like, okay, all right, Randy, it's over. That's it. They're never going to call me again. I'm never going to work again. It's done. It's finished. I'm not going on. I might as well just go collect food stamps or learn how to be a transmission specialist.
Yes. Every time a show was canceled, every time something was finished, I always felt for the first 5-10 years I'm an imposter, and I've just been found out. No one's going to fall for my act again. Mm-hmm. And just after, I first started doing television in the late 80s. So 89, 99, 09, after so many years of one job following another, I stopped believing that, and I started to believe there'll always be another show. And that the minute I bought into that, things slowed down for me. So yeah. If you're working, you think you'll never work again, and when you're not working, you're convinced you will. It's totally unpredictable. It's fate is a lady with a great deal of what can I say, whimsical thoughts, and fates will always change like the wind.
Well, I'm hoping that'll take off for me here in the not too distant future. But you wrote a wonderful book about Johnny Olson.
Johnny, he was my mentor. He started me in the business, and after he passed away, I got a phone call from his wife's cousin. He was long gone. She was in a nursing home. They were closing out the house, and they found cartons of his possessions that he'd saved for his entire 58 years in broadcasting. And there were some letters from me in there, and it led to a phone call from the folks closing out the house. So I didn't know them. They didn't know me, but they said, "Hey, were you friends with Johnny?" Apparently, because there are letters from you that he kept. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we're getting rid of everything that he did keep, and his wife kept after his passing. Would you like all those things?" Mm-hmm. Well, I was ready to drive to Wisconsin, right. But they all came, and when the boxes arrived, there was an outline for a book he was hoping to write, an autobiography about the business, not so much him, but about the things he had experienced in over half a century in the broadcasting business. I saw that, and it was gold. I mean, his view of the birth of television. So as a return of the favors he had done me, I finished, if you will, the book that he first thought about writing.
Yeah,
so that was a labor of love.
The title of it is A Voice in Time, From the Birth of Modern Media to the Price is Right, Johnny Olson. And how important was Johnny Olson and Rod Righty and Charlie O'Donnell in your life?
My goodness. Well, Johnny had no kids, and my parents were totally against broadcasting, as any parents would be. I mean, if I had a kid and said they wanted to get into radio, I'd be like, "Don't do it." So, he sort of became a surrogate, a mentor is too weak a word. Surrogate parent is too harsh, too heavy of a word, but somewhere in between there. His encouragement was very fatherly, and I owe it all to him because he gave me the sense that I could actually do this, and he empowered me by, instead of saying, he was like, "You can do this, get in a radio, send me your tapes and practice up, and I'll send you scripts." I mean, wow, what an encouraging thing. So was he part of why I pursued the business and had success? Absolutely. Yeah. And people like Charlie O'Donnell was also very empowering and encouraging. People like Gene Wood were less so, but I did learn from watching all of these guys.
Yeah, there's always that one or two that are like a little afraid that you're going to maybe take a job away from them, so they're less encouraging. I've run across that numerous times, including my own mother, who said to me when she heard me on the college radio station, she was down on campus with the family members, and her first comment to me, it's a joke in the business, but it's true what my mother said to me. She said, "Son, you have a perfect face for radio." Because I had an uncle who,
You did such great work with the Groundlings. There's no way you're not audience friendly.
No, I'm very audience friendly. Of course, I was in San Diego just a couple of weekends ago, performing down there, which I really loved. Except it was too bloody cold for me, and I don't remember San Diego being that cold. But I had an uncle who was in the business, and he was a comedian on Miami Beach, so I naturally gravitated towards that when my first initial plans in life kind of.
No, wait a minute. We talked about this. Was that Tubby Boots?
Yeah, Tubby Boots. Charles Booth was his real name. We are somehow or another related to the Booth family. However, if you go to Baltimore, you'll find out that there are an awful lot of people related to John Wilkes Booth in some form or another, and it's funny because when I was at George Washington University, Randy, I had Roger Mudd as one of my journalism professors. And Roger Mudd's great-great-grandfather was Dr. Mudd, who worked on John Wilkes Booth, who was later cleared, about 100 years later, cleared of all charges that he was a conspirator to kill Abraham Lincoln. So it kind of is an interesting small world, And, of course,
yes, it is.
The people that you and I both know, it's an interest, as you said to me on the phone, Gary, the small world. I mean, Will Schreiner and I are old friends, and you and I have known each other a while. So the world keeps shrinking, keeps shrinking. It's scary.
Well, the world needs to be sanforized. Apparently.
Well, let me say this, Randy, that the world is scaring me to no end, and I'm glad that my days are going to be over with soon.
Oh, God. Nobody gets off that easy. Come on.
No.
If your listeners ought to know, I just got to add in, you were talking about Dr. Mudd, and that's where the phrase, your name is Mudd, came from.
Yes, exactly. Mark Goodson was also a very important person to you in your career.
Yes.
Talk about that a bit, would you?
Well, my goodness, there was something about the way I appeared as a contestant on some of the shows that appealed in some way to them as being, good television. So I was invited by Mark Goodson to be at all these run-throughs for new game ideas where they would, make up rules and adapt shows and develop shows and then shoot pilots and do network presentations. So I was around the Goodson-Todman offices first as a contestant and then as sort of this run-through character and then playing contestant on pilots. And Mark Goodson was a fascinating character. Most people just know the name. This is a Mark Goodson, Bill Todman production. But Mark Goodson was an announcer in the early radio days, in his early days. And, while he had more success than anybody could ever hope to, he was quite an interesting character in that he still had this feeling of an imposter, and he felt disrespected and not accepted by the show business elite. Yeah. So with the money that he had, he tried to, reassure himself. He went out and he bought Picasso paintings. He lived at the Beverly Hills Hotel. He had Napoleon's desk in his office. He was working from Napoleon Bonaparte's desk. Talk about a Napoleonic complex.
Yeah. Well, was that the short desk or was that the tall one?
That was the short one. Yeah. Very short.
Thank you. You have a quote on your website that I find really fascinating. It's about why you wanted to be who you are. And the quote is, baseball players hope someday to pitch a World Series win for the Yankees. Vaudevillians aim to play the Palace. Comedians hope for their own sitcom. Entrepreneurs work to start their next Microsoft or Apple. Game show announcers dream of The Price is Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can sum it up any better than that, why you do what you do. We all have something in mind. Hopefully mine is to take over for Charlie Rose, but at the rate that he's going at 75, he's not dying anytime soon.
That's a great goal, though, because he's a fascinating character. And I don't know where he gets the energy to do the CBS morning show, the PBS show. I mean, he's just everywhere, but he's highly, highly skilled. Very knowledgeable.
He feeds on it left and right. What's the best advice you ever got from all the people that you've ever worked with, or pieces of advice that you've taken on and you utilize to further your career?
Yeah, everybody has something to offer. There's nobody who isn't a gift to know if you get to know them deeply enough. In other words, don't dismiss people because they don't look right or they had nothing to say the first 10 seconds you spoke with them. It's very easy in the entertainment business to, dismiss the unwashed masses, the audience members, the folks who, don't seem to have much value. But Johnny Olson taught me everybody has a story, value, something to share, and your job is to find it. You know, it may not be apparent, it may not be something that's on the surface, but everybody's got value and their own life experiences that we can all learn something from. Yeah. I think that was golden, because I stopped being arrogant and dismissive of people who I thought were not, we're all here, on the planet. Doing the same thing, and we all have our own strengths and attributes.
I think that Hollywood perpetrates that arrogance too. You see young actors. I have a couple of friends of mine who work on The Young and the Restless, and I remember talking to one of them, and I said, "How are these young people coming in?" He said, "Well, some of them have had to really pay their dues, so they're a little more humble." He says, "But there's a few that we've had over the years that come in that haven't really paid their dues on stage somewhere, and they were lucky enough because they were pretty enough to get a job. They don't last long, and they really don't get along with the rest of the cast." Randy, where's the game show world going? I know that there aren't that many game shows on. There's the Game Show Network. But where are things going? And, of course, there's the corporate world and casinos that you do with Matt and other people. But where's game shows going? Are they ever going to come back to television?
I think they are on television now. They've morphed in a way that you don't recognize them. The networks and cable channels are full of competition shows. You know that the fashion shows that are competitions, cooking shows that are competitions. Right. They're all game shows at the base. Anytime there's a competition and a prize, I mean, it's a game. So they've morphed. They're not recognizable with, shag carpeting and neon on the sets, and host, people applauding, and a host, "Hey, how you doing, everybody?" They look different, they smell different, they sound different, but they're here. They have just changed with the times.
Yeah, I wish they would come back. It's so much fun. If there is one thing you could do, God comes to you tomorrow and says, "Randy West, for the rest of your life, you can do this, but you can't do all the other stuff." What would it be? Would it be voiceovers? Would it be acting, game show host, announcer? Game show announcer. I love hosting the show. The burden is on you. And, I don't feel the ego necessity to be the star, or don't want the responsibility of carrying the show. I'm just happy to be part of the action. And I love working in television because you're part of a team of people who are tops at what they do. Lighting people in television, there's no second chance. I mean, you got 100 people who are each specialists: hair and makeup, lighting, directors, cameras, all these people, sound. All these people have a specialty, and when it's their moment to do it right, it's just like my moment when the director says, "Cue announce." I may have only 10 seconds of copy, but I need to deliver and deliver perfectly, or the whole team goes down the drain. So working as a member of a team full of professionals, that camaraderie and that teamwork is a tremendous turn on for me. So I just love that milieu, that game show or television show family that I get to be part of. Now, I got to ask you this because a friend of mine asked me to ask you this because I've never been in game shows. The girls like Carol Merrill and all the rest that are there that are pointing out the merchandise like on The Price is Right. How nice are they, or are they caught up in their own little world as well?
Well, there have been a few who, Diane Parkinson will go nameless, who have caused backstage drama and have not made the workplace a happy environment for some. But I will tell you, with a very, very, very few exceptions, these are wonderful people, smart and bright and clever and fun and congenial and just life of the party. And I'll tell you why, because there's always, like you said about Young and Restless, there's always another pretty face coming up. And they're not there just because they look good. There's plenty of people that look good. You want to work with people who are cooperative. And if there's something I didn't fully understand getting in, talent is important, but only to a certain point. Proficiency, you need to be good to a certain level of reliance and competence, and maybe 10% above that. But being perfect and striving to be better to put that energy in being a team member and a joy to have on the set and a pleasant personality. Because once you've exceeded expectations, greater talent won't take you as far as the focus on being a member of the team and a bright spot in the workforce, in the workplace.
Exactly.
That, to me, I didn't understand. So those models that you're talking about, the ones who have succeeded and have been around, they are just marvelous, fun people. Vanna couldn't be a sweeter person to be around, and the same is true for those Price is Right models that we fell in love with, Holly Hallstrom and Janice Pennington. I mean, these are wonderful people.
Where's Holly?
Wonderful.
Let me talk to
Holly's. Yeah, I've spoken to Holly. It's been a year now since I have, but she's still a pistol, a wonderful person. She's just great. These people are just marvelous. Claudia Jordan is another great name from the Price is Right, who went on to Deal or No Deal.
Before we let you go, and this half hour has gone by quickly, and of course Randy's going to be back with us. He's promised me he would, even if I don't pay him this time. What's next for you, my friend?
Dinner, a late dinner.
No.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at a couple of game shows that are starting up. You know, the old Family Feud that came back to ABC last summer, if you recall, was in prime time, an hour once a week. Right. The success of that has brought ABC to reviving Pyramid. The old $100,000 Pyramid is coming back for this summer.
Wow.
And I'm hoping that's just beginning pre-production now. They'll be shooting in New York a few months down the road for summer, and my name is in that hopper, so I'm always pursuing the next great game show, and when those are few and far between, I'm thrilled to go back on the road with The Price is Right Live. That's a role that I originated, the traveling stage show, The Price is Right, about 11 years ago, and that's still touring the country, thank goodness, around all North America, the U.S. and Canada, and I've been lucky enough to be welcomed back on a few occasions, so that could be the next stop for me. There's always something going on, and I love that about the business. It's a challenge, but to stay employed. But the good thing is, it's never the same 2 days in a row.
That's for sure. Randy West, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on The Express. Also to my first guest, Jason Greer. And to all of you out there, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here on The Express. We'll be back next week with another exciting show. Until then, please take care of yourselves and each other. And don't forget about me on Facebook as well as YouTube.com, Gary Allen, The Express. Until then, good night and thank you.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.